Alright, so this is the Fiio R7 desktop streaming player and DAC and amp, and you can get a lot of functionality for what you pay for with this device. So let's unbox it and I'll tell you more about it. And we have the R7 in here. Let's go ahead and take that out. And then we have another box in here. So we'll come back to the R7, but let's look at the accessories pack. So it looks like they do provide you with an additional fuse, as well as a 3.5mm to 6.3mm adapter. And then you have your standard power cable. They do provide you with a small dust cap, some type of stickers here. And then we do have a USB-C to USB-A cable. This would be to plug into your computer or laptop, let's say. Then you have your quick start guide, a small warranty card. Oh, and here's a card that tells you how to use those double-sided adhesive tapes that we saw earlier. It's actually for putting the R7 on the stands we're about to see. So you're actually provided with two stands. You have this flat one right here for the R7, and then you can just put the R7 on this flat stand and just have it set up like this. This will protect your desktop from any scratches and so on from the metal of the R7. They also include this angle stand, which is the one I think I prefer. And what this is going to do is actually going to put the R7 at an angle. So if we just place the R7 on top, we see right here that it actually angles the R7 up a little bit. This is going to allow you to see the screen better, as well as to access these dials a little bit better. I think that's the better option to go with, but it's up to you. They do provide the angled stand as well as the flat stand. So it's a nice thing they provide both. All right, and here we see the R7. The nice thing about the R7 is that it comes in both black or white. And you can see the nice ventilation on the sides here of the unit, and both sides have the ventilation, which will keep the R7 nice and cool. And the R7 is actually quite small. It only measures 110 millimeters wide by 134 millimeters in length and 160 millimeters in height. So the R7 will actually not take up a lot of space on your desktop, which is really nice. So before we get into the front panel and all the inputs and outputs in the back, I do want to mention a few things about the R7. It does use the ESS Sabre ES9068AS DAC, as well as dual THX AAA 788 plus headphone amplifiers. The R7 uses the Qualcomm Snapdragon 660 processor, runs on Android 10, and since it's running on Android 10 OS, this means that you'll be able to install third-party audio streaming apps like Tidal, Deezer, Qobuz, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Roon, so you can really pick your poison when it comes to what streaming service you want to use. So what if you're an Apple Music or iOS device user, such as myself? Don't worry, as you can use the AirPlay mode on this device to stream audio to your Fiio R7. Another nice feature is that you can use the Fiio control app on your smartphone to control the Fiio R7. The R7 supports upgrading its firmware, so you can be sure you'll have all the latest features that the R7 supports. So taking a look at the build quality of the R7, it looks very well built. It's got a nice metal construction all around. Again, it's got these vents on both sides, and it does have a mesh to protect against dust and dust bunnies getting into the system. In the back of the unit, you can see that all the connections are well spaced out, giving you plenty of space for wires and so on to come out and go into this system. Okay, let's take a look at the front of the unit. The first thing that stands out about this system is the integrated 5-inch touchscreen display that we see here, and I'll turn it on in just a bit so you guys can see that for yourself. And we have the two dials here. The first one is the power and volume control right here, and then we have the output selector, and it has settings for power output, line output, pre-out, or both power output as well as pre-out at the same time. So that means you can actually have your headphones and active speakers connected and output to both at the same time if you wanted to. Or the very nice thing about this device is that you can choose between listening to your headphone or listening to your speakers, and you don't have to disconnect your headphones, for example. You could even connect it and just use the power output whenever you want to use your headphones and the line output whenever you want to use your active speakers. And then just use the pre-out or line out setting whenever you want to use your active speakers. And so you may be asking, where do I plug in my headphones? And this right here is just a cover that you can remove. And this exposes three outputs on the front of the unit. First, you have the 4-pin balanced XLR connector for balanced headphones. Next, you have the balanced 4.4mm connector for, again, balanced headphones or IEMs. And finally, at the bottom, you have the unbalanced 6.3mm connector for unbalanced headphones. All right, and here's the back of the unit. And before we get into all the connections in the back, I do want to thank Opos Audio for sending out the Fiio R7 for my review. Without them sending this out, this review would not not be possible. All right, so let's go over all the ports and connections here. Right here, you have a micro SD card reader. This allows you to load your favorite MP3 or music files into a micro SD, and it does support up to 2 terabytes of storage, which is great. Now the R7 itself has a built-in 64 gigabytes of storage that you can use as well. Next up in the middle here, you have a USB-C 3.0 connector, which has multiple functions. You can use this to connect up to your PC or laptop to use the R7 as your DAC for your PC or laptop. You can also use this USB-C connection in exclusive DisplayPort mode, allowing you to connect an external monitor, which is going to allow you to view music videos or movies playing from the R7, which is really great. Next, we have a USB-A host mode connector, which can be used to plug in an external hard drive, so you can load up all your music and MP3s and so on onto an external hard drive connected up to the R7, and you can access all your music from there and play it directly from the R7. Now we're going to move over to the left hand side here, and we have 2 sets of RCA line outs for left and right channels. At the bottom here, we have a right and left 3-pin XLR connectors for balanced line out. If we move on to the middle here, we have an optical in as well as a coaxial in connector, and then we have an optical out and coaxial out connections. And in the bottom here, we have a LAN or Ethernet cable connector. That means that you'll be able to connect this up to your wired network in your home. That way you don't have to mess around with using Wi-Fi and possibly have a bad connection when playing your music. But the R7 does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability. You see here, this is the antenna for that. And for Wi-Fi, it supports both 5 gigahertz and the 2.5 gigahertz bands. And for Bluetooth, it supports Bluetooth 5.0. It can receive SBC, AAC, and LDAC codecs, and it can transmit SBC, AAC, aptX, aptX HD, LDAC, and LHDC codecs. Okay, and here on the right, we have something interesting that I really haven't seen in any other device before, and this is an AC/DC power switch. So by default, you could just use the included power cable and use the AC power to power this up. However, using AC can introduce some noise, so the preferred thing would be to use an external DC power input, such as Fiio's PL50 linear DC power supply. That's gonna create a nice noise-free environment for your R7. That also is gonna give you that rich, dark background, so you don't hear any background noise when you're listening to your headphones or IEMs, for example. And then here we have a built-in power on and off switch, as well as the connector for the AC power. Okay, now that we went over all the connections, I'm gonna go ahead and power this on and tell you about all its built-in features. And to power on the R7, we're just gonna hold down this power button for about 2 seconds, and we should see it booting up. So we just see Fiio on the screen there. Alright, and the first thing we see here lit up is the customizable RGB lights around the dials. So they're blue right now, but you can customize them for different colors and to indicate different status indicators. Also on the bottom here, there are 3 customizable touch buttons that you can configure to do whatever action you want. Okay, so right now it is in USB DAC mode, but we go ahead and press this icon on the top left. It will take us to the input/mode selection screen. As we can see here, we have 8 different operating modes. We have Android mode, which is kind of the standard mode. And Android mode is going to go ahead and allow you to install those third-party apps such as Spotify and so on. So if you do want to use a third-party app to play your music, go ahead and use Android mode. Now you can select pure music. What that will do is go ahead and disable all those third-party apps and only run the Fiio app for playing music. Again, as I mentioned before, if you do have Apple Music or you're using iOS devices, you can use AirPlay to go ahead and stream your music to the R7 just by setting the R7 in AirPlay mode. Of course, if you want to use the R7 with your PC or laptop, you can go ahead and set it to USB DAC mode, and it will pretty much use the R7 as an external DAC and allow you to play your music from your PC or laptop using whatever streaming service you like. Then we have Bluetooth receiving mode. So of course you can use Bluetooth to stream your audio to this device using Bluetooth receiving mode. Now, if you have a coax cable connected to the incoming port on this device, you can set it to coax mode and it'll play the audio from there. Then we have Roon Ready, so you can use Roon to play music to this device. And then finally, you have optical in mode, which allows you to play audio from the optical in coming in through an optical cable. So that pretty much describes all the modes that are available. Just gonna go ahead and select Android. So you do have things like a full web browser. So if you wanted to get to certain things, you can go ahead and go to YouTube, for example. I don't have the internet connected right now, As you can see here, we can go ahead and play videos. And again, you can use these customizable touch buttons at the bottom here. We have the Fiio Music app. So you can totally just use the Fiio Music app to play your music if you wanted to. Allows you to go through your different tabs that are open. The settings here and configure different things, just such as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. And very much acts just like any Android-based smartphone. And of course, you can go to the Google Play Store right here and download any streaming music app that you may want to use. And so one thing I did want to talk about are the different gain levels that the R7 supports. So if you go to settings and audio and you go to gain, you see that it has 5 different gain levels. It has low, medium, high, super high, and ultra high. Now the R7 is capable of outputting up to 3.6 watts of power, which is more than enough to handle any headphone. And so another thing to note about the Fiio R7 is that it's part of a larger ecosystem that includes the Fiio SP3 active desktop speakers, which is a great pairing with the R7, as well as the Fiio FT3 dynamic headphones, which also work very well with the R7. So consider those active speakers or headphones if you are going to pick up the R7, because they will work very well with the Fiio R7. Or right now that I got the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with the Fiio R7, I can give you my thoughts on the sound, both in terms of the DAC and the amplifier portion of this device, since it's an all-in-one unit. I got to try the Fiio R7 with lots of different headphones, including the Growl OAE1, these 300 ohm Sennheiser HC800 series, the Sennheiser HC490 Pros, as well as the Meze 109 Pros. And these are just some of the headphones I got to try out with the R7. Of course, I got to try lots of different music from my audiophile playlist. And so first, to start off with the amplifier portion of this R7. It's great that you can use the amp portion of the Fiio R7 with both active speakers and headphones. It would have been nice, however, for a bigger unit such as this to also power passive speakers. For headphones, it's nice that you have your choice of output connectors, such as the 6.3mm unbalanced connection here at the bottom, the 4.4 Pentacon balanced connection in the middle, and even a full-size XLR connection. My only gripe is that you will have to use a 3.5mm to 6.3mm adapter to use most of your unbalanced headphones. I wish it just also had a 3.5mm connection. Again, with its bigger size, it could have been added, I think. Now for me, the biggest drawback of the Fiio R7 is the lower power output when I tried it with several headphones. Some of those headphones, which you see here in front of you, it just struggled with playing audio at the level that I like listening to, which I'll admit might be a little on the louder side than most people are used to hearing. I found that even on the ultra high gain setting, which is the highest you can go on the R7, I still had to put the volume level up to about 70 to 80. And I noticed that once I went past 80 or so, I felt that it would just distort the audio. I did find that using the balance connector did help, such as with the Growl OAE1s. Once I used that balance cable to plug into the balance connection, the R7 had no problems powering the Growl OAE1s. However, with the unbalanced connection on the OAE1, it just wasn't loud enough. And once I did use this balance connector, the volume was just perfect. One of the few headphones that sounded loud enough on the 6.3mm unbalanced connector was the Meze 109 Pros, but this headphone has an impedance of only 40 ohms and it's pretty easy to drive, and I still had to turn it up about 80 on the volume knob to get it to my preferred listening level. Again, all this was really surprising given the larger size of the R7. However, I must admit there is probably a lot more hardware in there than in your typical headphone amplifier, due to it having such a large screen that it has to, power and control and all that, and an OS that runs on Android, plus all the connectivity available in the back of the unit. So maybe that has something to do with the amplifier not being as loud as some of my other headphone amplifiers. That being said, let's move on to the DAC portion of the R7, where I will talk about how it performed as far as sound with the music I played on it. For the tonality, I would say that it's a warm sounding DAC, and it sounded a bit dark to me. The bass was fairly neutral and flat, which some people may like, but I wish the bass had more impact. However, for those looking for a fairly neutral sound signature, you may enjoy the DAC on the R7. The bass was not muddy at all, and I felt like it was fairly tight and controlled. The mid-range had the biggest presence, and vocals, as well as string instruments, sounded very pleasant. Vocals definitely sounded forward. I did feel like the clarity of the vocals wasn't as good as it could be though. As for the treble on the R7, I felt it was quite tamed down. Instead of focusing on the clarity of the treble, instead they opted for a smoother, less fatiguing listening experience. Due to this fact, the treble is not as revealing as other DACs I've listened to. It's really missing some of that air in the high end. The positive is that the treble never sounds harsh or sibilant, and you can sit down and really enjoy listening to your music for quite a long time without having to worry about ear fatigue. The R7 has a mid to wide soundstage with the instruments pretty well separated, giving you a sense of distance from your ears. As for vocals, they sounded more intimate and a lot more forward and present the instruments in the music, which sounded a little bit back. I would say that the imaging on the R7 is very good. The vocals are well centered, and you can clearly pick out the instrument sounds in the music, giving you a very accurate position of both vocals and instruments with clarity. There's also a good sense of depth and separation between the vocals as well as the different instruments playing in the music. Overall, the Fiio R7 looks like an excellent all-in-one product, perfect for any minimalist desktop setup. While it is a bit more expensive option for an all-in-one DAC and headphone amp, you do get a fairly large Android-based LCD screen display that makes it look stunning on any desktop. The R7 also has plenty of connectivity options and extras that you will not get with the purchase of a separate DAC and headphone amp, for example. I think that those people that are looking for a fairly flat sound signature, who enjoy listening to vocals and want to be able to listen to their music for long listening sessions without ear fatigue, will definitely enjoy the Fiio R7. So if you're in the market for a new DAC and headphone amplifier, consider the Fiio R7 instead, because it has all of that built into one nice looking unit and also adds a streaming player capability for about what you would pay when purchasing a new separate DAC and headphone amp. Thanks again to Outpost Audio for sending out this unit for my review, and if you guys are interested in picking one up, I will leave links down in the description below. So I hope you all enjoyed the video on the Fiio R7, and I'll see you in the next one.